There comes a pivotal moment in nearly every work of fiction where, had things gone just a hair differently, the progress of said story would have been affected so significantly that you may as well consider it an entirely different story, one that would often be considered mundane, boring, or empty. You could say that an action with so much weight would, in a sense, end the series as the viewers knew it. An example of this would be Count Dooku having the potential to end Star Wars itself. If he had chosen to kill Anakin in episode 2, instead of just cutting his arm off and force pushing him away, then there would be no Darth Vader, no Jedi Purge, and Palpatine's rise to Emperor would have been considerably more difficult. The Empire never forms, and with Anakin dead, there's no Luke or Leia to be born. Count Dooku nearly ended Star Wars preemptively before Disney could do it. If Thor would have just gone for the head, there would have been no need for the film Endgame, and the MCU's Infinity Saga would have ended right there. Likewise, in Black Clover, there are moments where the very fabric of the series would have been stretched too far that it would have snapped and ended the series altogether. One of the most notorious near-series ending moments in Black Clover revolves around Yami Sukehiro, the captain of the Black Bulls, and this particular moment actually happens very early on, and because it was so soon in the series, we had no idea how truly pivotal this moment would end up being in the long-term future of Black Clover. A while ago, YouTube recommended me a video by No Operator of the time when Sukuna almost ended the series of Jujutsu Kaisen. Upon watching it, it immediately made me think of this video that you are currently watching now. But way back in the Eye of the Midnight Sun encounter arc, which takes place between chapters 38 through 56, and more specifically in the chapters of 47 through 53, Yami would save Asta from his battle with the Eye of the Midnight Sun leader, Patri, who we knew as Licht at the time. While Yami would have the upper hand for the majority of the fight, Patri would pull out his strongest spell, the Ray of Divine Punishment. Yami didn't believe that he'd be able to take on the spell, so he surrounded him and Asta in the Black Cocoon. Luckily, he would be broken out of the situation by Ghosh, as he would reflect the light back at Patri. But the battle would not be over just yet, as the Third Eye would arrive. Veto the Despair of Beast Magic, Raya the Disloyal of Copy Magic, and Fauna the Hateful of Flame Magic, and Chosen of the Fire Spirit Salamander. They were stated by Patri to be the strongest within the organization, even stronger than himself, and this is backed up by statements from Ghosh, databook statements, and statements by the narrator in the anime. Despite just having been fearful of Patri's Ray of Divine Punishment, Yami would leap forward into battle in order to protect his squad members against the Third Eye. In an epic display of power adaptation, Yami would be somehow strong enough to hold the three of them off, despite protecting Asta, Ghosh, and Finral. Even though Ghosh stated that the Third Eye were on a completely different level than Patri. And remember that the main display of power that Ghosh would have experienced from Patri was his Ray of Divine Punishment, something that Yami feared that he would lose to. Now, instead, he's fighting all the Third Eye at once, with his only hiccup is that he encountered Veto, and Veto's claws destroyed the katana. Despite this, even when Asta offered to help him by his side, Yami refused it because he could feel his power rising, and he thought he was just about to surpass his limits and defeat the Third Eye. But he would be interrupted and knocked on his butt by the arrival of the captains Charlotte, Nozel, and Jack the Ripper. Again, Yami says to them that he was only a second away from breaking his limits yet again, but their arrival stopped that from happening. Instead, Yami would watch from the sidelines as the captains fought the Third Eye, before using the chaos of the battle as a distraction to land a sneak attack on Patri alongside Asta, which would quickly lead to the end of the battle, with it pretty much being a tie. No major losses on either side, but what if I told you that if the captains never arrived, or say, they arrived much later as to allow Yami to break his limits, then Black Clover as we know it would have ended. And a lot of that has to do with so many different branching pathways of importance that stem from each of the Third Eye members and Patri. But when it comes to Yami's predicted limit break, he did believe that it would have allowed him to beat the Third Eye, and he would be proven correct that his limit break was coming, as the next time that he was forced to push himself, which was in the Seabed Temple arc, he unlocked Dimension Slash. Now this leads to a minor contention. It seems that in the Seabed Temple arc, Yami unlocked Dimension Slash specifically because it was the precise spell that he needed, as there was a spatial mage along the Eye of the Midnight Sun who had trapped Yami and Gifso in a different dimension, so he needed a spell that could cut through dimensions. That wasn't a problem in the Eye of the Midnight Sun encounter arc, so he may not have developed Dimension Slash at that point, but I don't think it necessarily matters for the sake of discussion, as you could still argue that Dimension Slash as a spell is still something that he could have awakened, as it is still a form of durability negation at the end of the day, and that would be useful in a battle against the Third Eye. Regardless, whatever new spell Yami would have awakened against the Third Eye still would have been very powerful, and it's been implied in the series that because the grimoire is made of mana and is tied to the wielder's soul, that when one discovers a new spell, it usually comes with the amplification of magic power or the increase in mana control, which is also an amplification in power that is basically a stat boost. So in this scenario, Yami gets some broken new spell that either is Dimension Slash or something of that same tier, and he gets an additional stat boost, so he's faster, stronger, and more durable. This allows him to have the power and capability of defeating the Third Eye, even if they were to activate their full power with the Evil Eye spell. Remember that Yami doesn't have an aversion to killing people as long as they're evil. He actually did this with Veto, so I don't think he'd necessarily just defeat the Third Eye and keep them captive. He could kill them. Now, I think the ramification on the plot of Yami killing any single one of these four would change the series at a fundamental level. A Third Eye member that I see changing the plot a lot is if Yami broke his limits and then killed Veto in the cave. Veto, while you might think he wasn't that influential, that couldn't be further from the truth. As for the Seabed Temple arc, he was a very foundational character, and his presence was foundational for other characters as well. Asta was shaken by the events of this battle with Veto, and this is where he learned to share the pain of Veto's own despair. From there on out, Asta would seek to merely stop his enemies, not kill them, at least for the most part. And Noelle was able to really develop her powers in this fight because she progressed into her Sea Dragon's Roar. But the way that the series fundamentally changes by an early Veto death would be that there would be no Veto in the Seabed Temple. Sure, it would likely just mean that a different Third Eye member would go there instead of Veto, probably a Raya who copied his beast magic and then used it to travel through the Grand Magic region. But the huge change is that in this scenario, Asta doesn't get cursed. This actually has huge plot ramifications. It means that Asta can keep using his arms. It means that Asta would never have to travel to the Witch's Forest because Vanessa never would have went there to help him. This means that Vanessa and Asta never learn their fate magic or their black form, unless if they stumble onto those powers from different but similar events that would occur from this split in the timeline. But this leads to an even greater divergence. If neither Asta or the Black Bulls go to the Witch's Forest, that means that she and her witches would be by themselves while getting attacked by Fauna and the Salamander, as well as Mars and Ladros. Now you might think that the Witch's Forest would lose in that power struggle, because the manga clearly displayed that the Witch Queen was shocked at the Salamander's power, and she did end up allowing for Asta and the Black Bulls to help stop them. But this was merely all a part of the Witch Queen's plans. She's actually more powerful than she let on, as at the conclusion of the battle, the Witch Queen would betray them and reveal her true power, in which Noelle implies that the Witch Queen was more powerful than the Salamander all along. This means that the Witch Queen likely could have defeated Fauna and used her puppet blood magic to turn her into her battle slave, and then doing the same thing to Ladros and Mars. With the Witch Queen now possessing the power of the Salamander and Ladros' absorption magic, as well as Mars, this would likely stoke the flames of a full-on war between the Witch's Forest and the Diamond Kingdom. A war that the Witch's Forest would probably win, with possibly Morris making himself more involved in the conflict. Of course, it could also end with Patri to wage a war against the Witch's Forest, both as vengeance for losing Fauna, but also to get the magic stone. With Veto killed early at the hands of Yami, Raya killed within his own self-destruct in the Seabed Temple, and now Fauna enslaved to the Witch Queen, I believe that Patri would not be strong enough to win that battle, even when unsealing the magic power that he had. And either Patri gets killed by the Witch Queen or enslaved, which remember, if Patri dies, so does William, which actually leads to the greatest ramifications on the plot. But I'll uncover that when we get to focus on Patri later in the video. Also, it was Veto's curse that led Magna and Luck to search a dungeon for a cure. This dungeon made Luck and Magna far stronger, over 25 times stronger to be precise. This is told to us in the canon light novel. If Asta is never cursed, Luck and Magna don't go to the dungeon, and that means both are 25 times weaker from there on out, which would change the Royal Knights exam arc to a large degree if it still even were to happen at all, which it likely wouldn't, because at that point the Eye of the Midnight Sun likely would have crumbled after losing so many members. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that the captains had just arrived a little bit later, allowing for Yami to surpass his limits and kill Veto. It leads to the early death of Raya, and the rise of the Witch's Forest, as they would hold the power of the Fire Spirit and a couple of Diamond Generals, and then it would likely lead to a full-scale war between the Witch's Forest and the Diamond Kingdom. The butterfly effect goes kinda crazy. But even if Yami had killed the second least influential of the four, Raya the Disloyal, it can be pretty easily seen that the changes would be rather dramatic, as Raya's copy magic was very important, as it allowed him to transform into William and pretend to be him in the captain's meeting that he could not attend to, because he was wounded from the battle with Yami, Asta, and the captains. If Yami had killed Raya early, then there was nobody to take William's spot, which means that the suspicions that were already present of William possibly being the traitor would only be heightened and lead to a far greater scrutiny of his actions, possibly leading to the captain being outed as a traitor long before he could reveal it to Julius himself. Keep in mind that in this scenario, Fauna doesn't die, so the spirit remains in the captivity of the witch's forest, which means that if the elves did end up somehow reincarnating, Fagolian never gets the fire spirit salamander, so Leopold dies, and Elf Kaiser has nobody to fight while in the Shadow Palace, which could possibly mean he could go help one of his fellow apostles and could have shifted the outcome of one of those battles. Raya was also the one who helped distract Yuno just enough for Zagrid in Ron's body to steal the magic stone that he needed to summon his body from the underworld. If Yami were to have killed Fauna in the cave, it would have changed the Witch's Forest arc, because it then would have been Raya sent to the Witch's Forest instead of Fauna. We wouldn't have the more hardened Mars to react to Fauna's self-destruct, and we wouldn't get Spirit Ladros. Raya may have actually fought better than Fauna, considering that he would be far more versatile than her, and he feasibly could have copied Ladros' magic ability of absorption and emission. And now that I think about it, if Raya does take absorption and emission, he would have nigh infinite potential, and he likely would also be taken by the Witch Queen with her puppet's blood magic and becoming another battle slave. I guess you could say that the captains arriving early stopped the Witch's Force from becoming a legitimate military power on the continent. But truly, the real series-ending moment would be if Yami had killed either Patri or all four of them. If the Eye of the Midnight Sun were to lose all four of its military leaders, they would likely disband entirely, or fracture into smaller terrorist cells that would be easily defeated by the Clover Kingdom military. Zagrid's plans would be completely foiled, and he would need to move on to a brand new strategy of manifesting his true form. But the root of upheaval would be in Patri's death. As I mentioned earlier, the death of Patri equals the death of William Vengeance, and the death of William Vengeance means the death of World Tree magic. Without World Tree magic, the Tree of Qliphoth ritual cannot be activated. This means that the Dark Triad would need to come up with an entirely different plan or wait for the next World Tree Mage to be born, which would completely restructure the Black Clover story from there on out. Black Clover would no longer be recognizable at that point, and it is now where I will warn you that I will be delving into manga spoilers from here on out. Without the Tree of Qliphoth, there is no reason for Yami to be captured at this point, nor is there reason for the Dark Triad to invade and take part in their battles with the Light Triad. Instead, this would have led to something completely different. Asta wouldn't learn Devil Union because he wouldn't be forced to. Noelle might not even learn Valkyrie armor or Saint States because she would not be pushed into it by Kevin or forced into it after Vanica kidnaps Lolopechka. Yuno might not have ever learned Spirit Dive because with the Eye of the Midnight Sun defeated, he would not have participated in the Mana Skin training at the Yolten volcano. And then you can see that what I'm getting at is that if the captains had arrived later and allowed for Yami to break his limits, Lucius Agratus' plans would have been utterly ruined. Without the Tree of Qliphoth, Lucius is nothing to what he is now. He needed his plan to go correctly. He needed for Julius to die and come back as a child because it left the Clover in a vulnerable state. He needed Zagrid to manifest as to allow Asta and Yuno to progress. That progression was the foundation for the defeat of Lucifero once he half manifested. And without this foundation, Lucifero manifests fully. But Lucifero with only half of his power is able to be beaten by Asta's True Devil Union. For a Dromlek to steal the Devil King's heart and be devoured by Lucius. With half of Lucifero's power, Lucius would invade the underworld, defeat Lucifero in one-on-one combat, and eat the rest of his heart, and consuming the rest of his power. This made Lucius' magic potent enough to create paladins and to shift the world into the heaven that he wished to make it. Though whether or not this could have played out, there are a couple things to consider. One is that Lucius can sense the mana of the future. Therefore, he likely knew that if Yami did break his limits, his plans would be ruined. And we know that he can manipulate Julius even when the Wizard King is in control of the body. This is implied before Julius is taken over. And this means that Lucius very well could have manipulated Julius to arrive at the cave and stop Yami from killing Patri if that were about to happen, saying that they needed to take him prisoner instead of killing him or something like that. But if Lucius didn't have that much control over Julius, then he would seriously need to reconsider his plans with the loss of World Tree magic and no longer be able to use the Tree of Qliphoth, either revealing himself earlier or backtracking from his plans and waiting in the Spade Kingdom until a new World Tree Mage would arrive and be born. But I think it could be argued that it might not be that Lucius could have stopped Yami from breaking his limits, but that he already did do that. He may well have been the one to use time magic or even just regular acts to cause the Clover captains to arrive on the scene a bit too early. I think it'd actually be really cool if Tabata revealed that that was the case. but we may never know. But I think I've clearly expressed that if Yami just had a few more seconds, he would have ended the series of Black Clover as we know it. Whether he killed one of the Third Eye, a few of them, or completely wiping out the Third Eye and Patri, it basically ends everything. The story would need to be entirely rewritten at that point, because all the plot and buildup would have been washed away by a single early dimension slash from Yami Sukehiro. We would have likely gotten a story more focused on the struggle between the Witch's Forest and the Diamond Kingdom. I think in this scenario, the Witch Queen could have risen as the main villain, especially if she ended up getting her hands on Ladros and Fauna's power, then eventually taking over the Diamond Kingdom and stealing Morris's power. A full-on war between the Clover Kingdom and the Witch's Forest could have been pretty epic, and maybe in this alternative timeline, one of the plot points could have been the Witch Queen realizing that there was something off about Julius Novachrono, and that she would be the one to eventually discover that Julius's power derived from the time devil Osteroth. Which it gets me hyped thinking about how crazy that would have been. Imagine if you're fighting this whole ass magical war and then you find out your general is the big bad all along. I probably could have made this video over an hour long if I had the time, as I could have discussed every little detail that could have been changed if Yami were allowed to break his limits early. But who knows, maybe one day I could turn this into a what if series. I used to make what ifs for Dragon Ball all the time back in the day, and I know that once Black Clover is finished, we will have serious what if potential to work with once we know everything about the story. With that being said though, let me know what you thought about this video. Do you think that Yami truly could have ended Black Clover as we know it if he were allowed to break his limits? Or would the differences not really have been that crazy as I have said? I think that they would be pretty crazy, especially if he wiped out all of them. Basically any scenario you pick, Black Clover is considerably changed. But thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you guys so much for the support on the channel. Hope you guys did enjoy. Leave a like if you did, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe, turn notifications, and also join my Discord and follow me on Twitter. Both of those are linked in the description down below. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.